The Old Gate, on memory, inheritance, and the quiet invitations we leave behind. There's a small family cemetery up the hill from the house. You don't see it from the road. You have to know it's there. A short walk across the grass, a gentle rise in the land, and then the stones appear nestled into the hillside. It isn't large, just a few markers standing in two solemn rows. The names have softened a little with time, the way stone always does when it's been sitting out in the weather long enough. My grandparents are there, my uncle too, a handful of others who helped shape this land long before I ever lived here. Most pretty days I walk up the hill. Not for any particular reason, just because it feels right to check in once in a while. I'll stand there a few minutes and talk to them the way family does. Nothing formal, just the kinds of things you'd say if someone were sitting across from you at the kitchen table. How the stand is doing, what the weather's been like, who stopped by that week and what I happened to bake. The wind moves through the grass the same way it always has, and the hill still looks out over the same fields they once worked themselves. It doesn't feel lonely up there. It feels like visiting. Years ago, the cemetery had a fence around it. Nothing fancy, just a simple barrier to mark the space and keep the pasture from wandering too close. At some point, the fencing came down. No one seems to remember exactly when. Old fences have a way of disappearing that way. One section leans, another rusts through, and eventually the whole thing is taken down and the land settles back into itself again. The cemetery stayed where it had always been. The fence was gone, but the gate remained. When I moved into the house, I found it in the basement. It was leaning against the wall behind a stack of old boards and a few things that had clearly been set aside years earlier. The metal was dull with age and covered in spiderwebs, thick enough that I briefly considered leaving it right where it was. I questioned my motives even more when I saw the added delight of an old snakeskin. Basements tend to collect the things no one quite knows what to do with anymore. Old tools, extra hinges, pieces of things that once belonged somewhere else. The gate had clearly been resting there for a long time. Dust along the edges, hinges stiff from sitting still, the metal cool and rough beneath the layer of cobwebs. Still, it felt wrong to leave it there, so I dragged it outside. The spider webs came off first, brushed away with a stick before I got close enough to deal with the rest. Then a bucket of water and an old rag did most of the work. The more I cleaned, the more the gate began to look like itself again. It was still weathered, still old, but steady. The kind of thing that had already done its job well for a long time and didn't seem particularly bothered by the passing of years. For a while, I wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Then the stand went up. The roadside stand sits not far from where the old outbuildings once stood. We built it from the same barnwood and doors that came from those buildings when they were taken apart. It's small, but it's solid. Shelves for bread and brownies and jars of things that sit there waiting for whoever happens to pull off the road. It's an honor stand. People come and go quietly throughout the day. Some leave a few dollars in the box. Some take a loaf of bread or something sweet and head back out toward the highway. But like any small place that welcomes strangers, it needed a sign. That's when the old gate made sense. I set it beside the stand and fastened the sign across the middle where the bars ran straight and even. The metal frame holds the word steady now, right where people turn in from the road. What once stood at the entrance to a small family cemetery now stands beside a roadside stand. The gate that once marked the place of the dead now greets the living. It still does what gates have always done. It invites people to come through. I think about that sometimes when I walk up the hill. The cemetery is quiet the way it has always been. The stones stand where they were placed, and the grass moves gently around them. Nothing about that place feels forgotten. The people buried there are part of the reason this land still feels like home. And down below, the old gate stands beside the road, holding a simple sign that tells people they're welcome to stop. In a quiet way, the two places belong to the same story. Because the Christian faith has always insisted that death does not close the final gate. The people who came before us are not erased, simply because their years on earth have ended. Their lives shaped the ground we stand on. Their work carried forward into the lives that came after them. And the gospel tells us something even better than memory. When Christ walked out of the tomb, The place we feared most stopped being the end of the road. The grave was never meant to be the final gate. It was only the doorway. And now, down beside the road, that old gate from the cemetery holds a small sign welcoming strangers to stop for a while. A quiet reminder that the story of this land, like the story of the gospel, was never meant to end at the grave.